What if I told you, behind the marble walls of ancient Rome's palaces, power wasn't just measured in gold or armies, but in the bodies people owned? For a male concubine life could mean silken sheets one night and a death sentence the next. You weren't free, but you were dangerously close to power, close enough to taste it, yet always one whisper away from ruin. Every smile, every touch, every glance was a gamble in a world where your worth was decided by the mood of the elite. Before we dive in, drop a comment with the exact time you're watching. I love seeing where and when my history travelers are tuning in. And if you enjoy uncovering the raw, unfiltered side of history they never taught in school, you might want to subscribe. No pressure, but this story is one you'll never forget. You wake before the sun, in that gray hour, when the air still carries the cool of night, and the whole villa holds its breath. The terracotta floor under your bare feet is cold enough to make you wince, but you don't dare shuffle too loudly. Someone important is still sleeping. And in a place like this, your life is partly measured in how quietly you exist. You listen for clues in the hallway. The slap of a servant's sandals means breakfast is on schedule. The heavier tread of a steward might mean a change in plans. That's your first test of the day, reading the mood without a word spoken. From your narrow bed in the servant's wing, you can just smell the faint smoke of the kitchen fires coming to life. Olive oil and barley bread will be the first scents drifting through the corridors, like a silent announcement that the day has begun. In ancient Rome, especially in the household of a powerful man, the kitchen worked on two schedules. One for the master and his guests, and a less generous one for the rest of you. The difference could be as small as a drizzle of honey, or as large as a whole roast boar. You have learned to accept these things. Without bitterness, luxury flows toward the center of power, and you are not yet close enough to touch it. The light is soft, filtered through high windows, catching motes of dust that hang in the air like lazy fireflies. In the master's rooms, someone is drawing back the shutters to let in more of it, and the clack of wooden hinges echoes down the hall. You picture him, your patron, lying back against embroidered cushions, the early warmth spilling over marble floors, his world already organized by other people's hands. That's your world too, but on a smaller stage. You dress in silence, the linen tunic falling easily over your shoulders. The fabric is light, but you know enough about the Roman summer to savor every bit of morning chill before it's burned away. Some mornings, you can almost imagine you're just another house servant. Your duties, nothing more than pouring wine, refilling lamps, carrying messages. But the truth is less simple. You are here not just to work, but to be seen, appreciated like a fine statue or a piece of silverware, with the difference that you can smile back. In this household, beauty and charm are currency, and you have both. That is what brought you here. It is also what keeps you here. The door frame is cool stone against your palm as you pause in the corridor. You catch the faint shuffle of a fellow attendant slipping into the atrium ahead of you. He glances over his shoulder, a quick measuring look, and you cannot help thinking of the marketplace merchants sizing up a rival stall. The competition here isn't shouted or fought in public. It's carried in the way someone enters a room, the angle of a smile, the timing of a compliment. Even at dawn, you are playing the game. Passing the atrium, you spot the impluvium, the shallow pool, at its center glimmering faintly in the low light. A few petals from yesterday's garland float on its surface, relics of some dinner or meeting you weren't invited to. The Romans loved their little touches of beauty, and here, even the remnants remind you that spectacle is part of daily life. You've learned to absorb those details, to carry them in your manner, so that when your turn comes to stand in the master's presence, you seem like you belong to his world. The household wakes in layers. Kitchen boys clatter amphorae into place. A slave polishes bronze lampstands until they gleam. Somewhere, the master's secretary is already scratching away at wax tablets, recording debts and messages. You pass a niche with a small household shrine, Lares and Penetes watching over the home, and you murmur a quick respectful greeting. It costs nothing, and in a house where every advantage matters, you take whatever small protections you can get. By the time you step into the peristyle, the square courtyard with its ring of columns, the first real rays of sunlight have touched the mosaic floor. You can see your breath in the shadowed corners, but the open sky promises heat to come. Here is where you sometimes catch a glimpse of the master before the day truly begins. If he's walking with a guest, you keep to the edges, eyes lowered. But if he's alone, you may be called forward for a brief word. Not about politics or business. That's not your place. But perhaps a comment on the weather, the color of the sunrise, the way the garden is growing. These are small things, but they build a bridge between his world and yours. And yet, there is always that undertone. You are not free. Every step, every glance is weighed. The wrong expression can make you invisible. The right one can place you in the center of the master's attention for the rest of the day. You have seen others rise and fall by nothing more than a well-timed joke or a moment of silence at the wrong time. It is like living inside a game where you are both a piece and part of the board. From the cool, open peristyle, the shift to the bathhouse begins almost without thought. Your feet finding the familiar path along the colonnaded passage, drawn by the muted echo of water against stone and the soft hiss of steam slipping under heavy doors. The air changes as you approach, growing thicker, scented faintly, with heated marble and pressed olive oil. In this household, bathing is never just about cleansing the body. It is ceremony display and the quiet exchange of information that never finds its way into official records. Inside, warmth folds over you like a heavy cloak. Steam moves lazily under the lamplight blurring edges until even the marble walls seem softened. Somewhere beyond, voices rise and fall, measured, deliberate, never hurried. You learn quickly in such places that what you overhear can be as valuable as anything you are told directly. You begin in the apoditerium, the changing room, where the stone benches glow faintly from the day's constant warmth. Your tunic is folded neatly into one of the carved niches, a small act of order in a place where every detail is noticed. Here conversation is minimal, only the shuffle of bare feet, the occasional clink of a bronze oil flask being set down. Everyone is aware that the true exchanges happen once you pass into the inner chambers. The tepidarium receives you with its gentle embrace heat that seeps into the skin without pressing too hard. The air smells faintly of myrtle and bay leaves, the herbs floating in bronze bowls near the water's edge. Across the pool, an older attendant leans toward a guest speaking in a voice so low you can't catch the words, but the tilt of his head and the faint curl of his lips tell you enough. In this place, charm is not light-hearted. It is a skill honed like a blade. The caldarium is another world. Thick steam obscures everything, turning figures into wavering shadows. You take your place along the heated marble bench, letting the weight of the air press against you. Snatches of conversation drift close, then fade the name of a senator, a whispered jest, a mention of someone's sudden misfortune. The heat demands stillness, and stillness makes the smallest words sound heavy. Then comes the plunge into the frigidarium. The cold seizes you sharp and absolute, forcing every muscle to tighten. To rise without shiver or gasp is its own silent display of discipline. Those who can step out with steady composure often navigate the rest of the household just as smoothly. A slave meets you in the outer chamber with a vessel of rose-scented oil. You smooth it over your arms and chest, letting the faint perfume cling. In a world where appearance is half your currency, the sheen on your skin and the trace of fragrance are not indulgences, they are part of the uniform. As you redress, two kitchen slaves hurry past, carrying baskets of clean towels, their feet leaving wet marks that vanish quickly on the warm floor. They keep their eyes lowered, their work unacknowledged but essential. Without them, the illusion of ease would collapse before it began. Near the doorway, a relief of Neptune commands the wall sea god, astride his chariot dolphins leaping ahead. Your fingers trace the worn lines of the carving, each groove smoothed by years of touch from those who passed before. The image seems to belong as much to the rhythm of the house as the columns and courtyards themselves. When you step back into the corridor, the cool air feels sharper against your face. The murmur of the household has grown livelier. Somewhere ahead, the clink of amphorae signals preparations for the first gathering of the day. The steam still clings faintly to your hair, and your movements feel measured, deliberate. The bath has done its work, shaping you not only for cleanliness, but for the silent performance that will follow. The corridor from the bathhouse curves toward a quieter wing of the villa, where the air feels cooler and the light falls in narrower beams. You pass under an archway into a chamber lined with wooden chests and polished bronze mirrors. This is where you choose how the day will see you. Dressing here is less about comfort and more about calculation. The tunics are arranged by fabric and color, each one a subtle signal: undyed linen for humility, deep-dyed wool for formality, lighter shades for moments when you are meant to blend into the background rather than stand out. You lift one from its peg, running your fingers over the weave. Linen breathes better in the summer heat, but a fine wool tunic, even in warm weather, tells a story of status and access. The Romans, after all, judge not just by the quality of your clothing, but by the effort it implies. You slip it over your head, feeling the fabric settle against your skin, and smooth it down with the flat of your palms. On a low table lies a row of small glass flasks, each one holding a different scent, the contents glimmering in the morning light. Olive oil infused with rose spikenard, imported from the East, and a faintly resinous blend favored by the master himself. A whisper of fragrance is expected. Too much becomes an announcement, and announcements are not your role unless called for. You tilt the flask, letting a few drops fall into your palm before working it lightly over your neck and wrists. A bronze mirror leans against the wall, its surface dulled in the center, but still catching enough of your reflection to serve its purpose. You study the line of your hair, the set of your jaw, the way the tunic falls over your shoulders. In this household presentation is not vanity. It is part of your service, an unspoken language that communicates loyalty, refinement, and readiness without a single word. From a chest in the corner, you draw out a narrow belt, its bronze clasp shaped like a curling vine. The belt does more than hold the tunic. It frames the body, hinting at shape, without drawing attention to it. That balances everything. You have seen others fail at it too plain, and they disappear from the master's eye. Too showy, and they risk being seen as presumptuous. A fellow attendant enters quietly, adjusting the hem of his own tunic. He gives you the briefest glance, the kind that weighs whether you will be competition today or simply part of the scenery. You return the look with calm neutrality. In a household where proximity to the master can mean influence, even the choice of a hemline becomes a silent contest. From somewhere beyond the chamber, you hear the rhythmic tread of the steward approaching. His footsteps pause at the doorway as he inspects the room without comment, then continue down the hall. The inspection is wordless, but not meaningless. It is a reminder that you are always being observed, even when you think the moment is yours. On a small stool rests a tray of simple ornaments, a signet ring you are permitted to wear when delivering messages, a thin bronze bracelet, a small brooch for fastening the shoulder of a formal cloak. You choose none today. Your role this morning is to be present without overshadowing. The absence of ornament is its own kind of message. As you fasten your belt and adjust the folds of your tunic one last time, the sunlight shifts, catching the faint sheen of oil on your skin. The scent of rose drifts upward, with your movements light enough to vanish before it becomes noticeable. The door curtain stirs in a passing breeze, and with it comes the distant sound of voices from the atrium, laughter layered over the deep tones of conversation. You step out of the chamber, the cool tiles firm under your feet, and join the slow current of movement toward the heart of the villa. The day is not yet half begun, but already every choice you have made, fabric scent posture, will shape how you are seen in the hours to come. From the quiet chamber where you dressed, your steps carry you toward the sound of voices in the atrium, mingling with the faint strum of a lyre and the rustle of parchment. But here's the question that hangs in the air. Like a drawn blade, can you turn a single line of verse into the key that unlocks a door of power? Today, you will find out. The room you enter is bright with high-light sunbeams, catching in floating dust until the air itself seems gilded. Along one wall, scrolls lie neatly stacked, Virgil, Horace, Ovid, Cicero, each waiting to be spoken into life. On a low table rest wax tablets and styluses, their smooth surfaces ready for the day's work. In this house, an attendant is valued not only for grace of movement, but for grace of mind, for the ability to quote a poet as easily as pouring a goblet of wine. You take your place at the bench posture, straight face, attentive. The tutor enters a wiry Greek freedman, whose calm voice carries the weight of one who has corrected senators without flinching. He places a scroll before you and says simply, "Again," but this time, let it breathe. You read aloud, shaping each syllable, while his hand gestures for patience, for rhythm. This is no mere recitation. It is transformation, turning words into music that lingers in the mind long after they are spoken. The lesson shifts. You must answer in verse crafting, replies that echo the structure of the original, while bending the meaning to fit your purpose. Such a skill can tilt a room in your favor, make the master smile, make a guest lean closer, make an enemy's barb dissolve into polite laughter. You remember a banquet not long ago, when one well-placed couplet silenced a rival more thoroughly than any rebuke could have done. Midway through, the tutor changes his test. A line from Cicero is read, and you must respond not with poetry, but persuasion, arguing without pressing, defending. without seeming defensive. It is like walking the edge of a blade, where a single misstep sends the meaning tumbling. In this space, you begin to understand how your role stretches beyond the visible. You are not just decoration. You are a living part of the villa's conversation, an unseen hand nudging the balance of opinion. He corrects you again. Your breathing, the tilt of your head, the way your eyes hold your listeners. Your words matter less if your eyes wander, he warns. You steady your gaze, speaking with a voice that now feels less like your own and more like a tool sharpened for a purpose. Outside, a dove calls softly from the courtyard, and for a heartbeat, your thoughts drift toward the open air. But the tutor's sharp tap on the scroll pulls you back. Again he orders. You obey, letting each phrase carry warmth, wrapped in precision. When the lesson ends, there is no praise, only the quiet gathering of scrolls and the soft scrape of sandals as the tutor departs. You remain for a moment, the practiced lines still echoing in your mind. Somewhere beyond these walls, guests are arriving, voices and footsteps growing louder. Soon the skill honed here will be tested in the shifting theater of the master's table. The dining room is already alive with the scent of roasted meats and spiced wine when you arrive. The low murmur of conversation rising in waves from the reclining guests. Long couches ring the room, each draped with woven cloths in colors chosen to flatter the daylight streaming through the high windows. Bronze lamps stand ready to take over when the sun begins to fade. This is not a meal. It is an exhibition, and you are part of the arrangement as much as the platters of figs and the carved ivory salt cellars. You move between the couches with measured steps, eyes catching details without seeming to linger. The master sits near the center, his position the sun around which the evening turns. Guests lean toward him as if warmth flows from his voice. You carry a tray of fresh bread toward a senator whose reputation for remembering names is matched only by his skill at forgetting debts. He smiles faintly, accepting the bread as though you have brought him a personal gift. Your task is not simply to serve, but to feed conversation sometimes, with a remark placed like a cushion beneath a fragile moment, sometimes with silence that invites others to fill it. You pour wine, your hand steady, tilting the amphora just enough to let the scent drift up before the first sip. You know which guest prefers the heavier Falernian, which leans toward the lighter Sacuban, and which simply wants their cup kept full to avoid speaking too much. Across the table, laughter bursts sudden and sharp. You glance over in time to see one of the younger guests raising his cup in a mock toast toward an absent rival. The master responds with a practiced chuckle, deflecting the edge of the joke before it can cut too deeply. You have learned to read these moments, when to let them pass, and when to guide them gently toward safer ground. A dish of honey-glazed dormice is passed to you, the scent rich and almost cloying. You place it before a poet whose latest verses have been the talk of the forum. He nods in thanks, his fingers lingering on the rim of the dish, as though weighing whether to eat or perform appreciation for the table. Here, every gesture is a line in an unspoken script. The servants carrying the heavier platters move along the outer edge of the room, their pace quick and unadorned. Your path is different, closer, slower, weaving between conversations like a thread that must not snag. You pause near the master's couch as he speaks of a recent debate in the Senate, and you catch the faintest glance from him, permission to step back without turning your back. Wine flows, and with it, the tempo of the room changes. The early formality loosens voices, lifting gestures, widening. A freedman guest begins to recite a tale of his travels eastward, his words painting markets in Antioch and harbors in Alexandria. You catch the look of a man who wants to be asked for more, and so you ask, just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. He launches into another scene, and the master's eyes rest briefly on you in acknowledgement. As the third course approaches, the air grows heavier with the scent of pepper and garum sauce. You bring fresh napkins, woven fine enough to pass for silk, laying them lightly on each guest's lap. The fabrics brush against rings and bracelets, drawing faint clinks of metal against skin. From the corner of your eye, you see the tutor from earlier in the day enter, leaning against a column to watch the scene unfold. His expression is unreadable, but you know he is listening not to the words, but to the way you place them. The banquet is your examination, though no one will call it that. A final refill of cups carries you past the master again, and in that brief pass, you hear him answer a question from a guest with a line you practiced only hours ago. The cadence is yours, the inflection precise, but now it sits in his voice, turning the table toward his favor. It is a quiet victory, one that leaves no mark, but shifts the room all the same. When the banquet thins and the heavier dishes are cleared, the villa exhales into a slower rhythm. Guests drift toward the gardens, drawn by the cool air and the gentle sway of oil lamps hung from the colonnades. You follow in their wake, keeping enough distance to move unnoticed, yet close enough to hear the undercurrent of talk. This is the hour when the formal words of the dining room dissolve into something looser, when hints of truth slip between the practiced lines. The garden's gravel paths crunch softly beneath your sandals. Moonlight filters through the laurel and cypress, painting the marble statues in silver and shadow. The air smells faintly of rosemary and damp earth, a welcome change from the thick perfume of the triclinium. The master walks with a visiting magistrate, their voices low, their pace unhurried. You angle your steps to remain within sight, but never in the line of their eyes. In this space, your presence is both invisible and intentional. They pause near a fountain, its water catching the lamplight in trembling patterns. The magistrate leans in slightly, his tone conspiratorial, and the master listens without interruption. You can't hear the words, but you've learned to read the silences, the long pause that means the weight of an offer, the small nod that signals agreement without commitment. This is the unrecorded business of Rome, sealed not with contracts, but with trust and the occasional shared secret. A pair of guests wander past you, one plucking at the leaves of a myrtle bush as he speaks of a horse race in the Circus Maximus. The other laughs too loudly, perhaps already deep into the wine. You offer a polite smile as they pass, though neither seems to notice. Their path leads them toward the far pergola, where music drifts faintly from a lyre in the shadows. At the garden's edge, a marble bench curves beneath a fig tree, its broad leaves whispering overhead. You take a place there for a moment, not to rest, but to watch. From here, you can see the way guests cluster, some in pairs, some in small knots, each grouping a web of interests and alliances. The master moves between them with ease, his gestures warm, his laughter measured. You can tell when he is listening for substance and when he is merely filling the air. A faint splash draws your attention back to the fountain. One of the younger attendants is refilling a guest's cup from a small jug, his head bowed just enough to be respectful without seeming servile. You note his technique, efficient quiet, and time to leave before the conversation shifts. Such small movements keep the flow of the evening seamless, and you file the detail away. The master's path eventually brings him back past where you stand. His eyes meet yours for a fraction of a moment, a silent acknowledgement that you are where you should be. He does not slow, but the glance is enough to confirm that you have played your part. In a household like this, approval often comes wordlessly woven into the smallest gestures. Far off, the magistrate's voice rises briefly, before softening again, as though the crux of their talk has passed. You suspect arrangements have been made, ones you will never hear described, but whose ripples will shape the household in the weeks to come. That is the nature of these shadowed walks. Decisions are made in the spaces between steps, under the cover of lamplight and the rustle of leaves. The night air cools as the moon climbs higher and the movement in the garden begins to thin. Some guests return to the warmth of the villa. Others linger in the shadows, unwilling to let the night end. You remain a part of the scenery, steady and attentive, knowing that the quiet of these moments is as much a part of your duty as the performance of the day. As the last guests drift inward and the lamps tremble in the night breeze, the household's quietest struggles take their places. Who smiles at you now, only to lay a snare before sunrise? You feel it first in the air around the servants' corridor, where silk whispers louder than speech. A hemline adjusted a finger higher, a belt clasp chosen to echo the master's taste, a trace of the same resin he wears on festival days, none of it accidental. In a house like this, rivalry does not bang on doors. It oils the hinges and waits. You cross the threshold of the attendance room and sense the arrangement of glances, the weighing of small advantages, the way a chair is left a little too close to the brazier, so the person who takes it will flush and fumble just when the steward appears. The hierarchy here is a mosaic whose tiles shift each day. The atriensis keeper of the front hall can shade a visitor's first impression. The dispensator counts the coin and can delay a purchase that would have suited your role. The cubicularius controls access to the master's private moments and can tilt those moments toward another favorite. Your path threads through these hands, and you measure each one not for friendship, but for temperature, warm, cool, or burning. You adjust your pace accordingly. A rival enters with an ease that asks to be noticed. His tunic newly pressed the fold at the shoulder, caught by a brooch you have not seen before. He says nothing to you, but his eyes slide over the tray you carry, taking inventory of your tasks as if they were accounts on a tablet. You answer not with a stare, but with steadiness, placing wax tablets where they will be found, quickly setting out a neatly mended cloak before it is requested, arriving by the master's study door exactly as the scribe stops speaking. Precision can be a shield when words would make dents you cannot polish out. Whispers move like smoke. Someone mentions that the tutor praised a voice no name attached, and yet the room seems to tilt. Someone else repeats a guest's preference as though it were secret, even though the amphora's seal still lies on the table. Rumor here is not a storm. It is a fine mist that dampens and chills, leaving no drop large enough to point at. You learn to ventilate it with facts the master liked. The lighter wine tonight, the senator asked for the scroll of Horace the garden lamp was trimmed before the second course. Accuracy is not glamour, but accuracy stays standing when glamour stumbles. You recall, how influence collects in odd corners. Under Claudius freedmen like Narcissus and Pallas shaped decisions without raising their voices, moving papers and audiences until outcomes felt inevitable to those who barely saw the hands arranging them. The lesson applies even in this smaller empire of rooms and corridors. A schedule adjusted by a quarter hour can change who shares a doorway with the master, and a doorway can change everything. Rivalry prefers daylight to darkness, but it thrives in lamp glow, where features soften and meanings slip. Someone accidentally misplaces a stylus you will soon need. Someone else forgets to send word that a guest has requested you, then remembers after the guest has been seated and satisfied. You do not rise to take the bait. You make a new stylus appear as though it had always been there. You reach the guest with an apology framed so gently it lands like a courtesy rather than a defense. The steward notices without looking like he notices, and that is a grain of weight added to your side of the scale. Questions help when answers would sound like protest. Shall I carry the Falernian or the Cacuban to the study place's choice in the steward's hand while reminding him you know the difference? Will the master prefer Cicero or Horace for the morning reading? Announces preparation without displaying ambition. You become practiced at these offerings that are not offerings, each one a small piece of kindling that may catch later. The politest warfare happens near thresholds. At the study door, a rival times his arrival to be seen first, then drifts aside with a courteous bow that leaves you entering second. You adjust your angle, so the master's first sight line crosses you both, neutralizing the trick without widening it into a scene. At the peristyle, another rival helps by taking a task that would have placed you near the master's couch. You accept the exchange and then request blandly to deliver the next message, turning the circle in your favor without a ripple. In the attendance room, the lamps burn lower. The talk grows softer, more pointed. Someone tells a story about a singer who rose too brightly and fell with a sound everyone pretended not to hear. The moral hums beneath the words, "Do not dazzle beyond the master's comfort. Do not overshine the light that feeds you." You nod as if in agreement, while filing the tale under warnings you will heed selectively. Restraint has its place. So does memorable grace when the hour is right. Your own defense is routine, stitched with poise. You check the fastenings on the travel chest the master may require tomorrow. You confirm the wax tablets are smoothed. The styluses sharpen the lamp wicks, trimmed to a length that will not smoke. You pass the shrine in the corner and straighten the small garland whose leaves have begun to curl not for piety alone, but because ordered edges blunt sharp tongues. The door curtain lifts in a light draft, and you sense rather than see the eyes that follow your small corrections and calculate their meaning. If you were to ask yourself what triumph looks like here, you would not picture applause. Triumph is a nod, given without smile, a task assigned without explanation, a question addressed to you while others listen as if the answer were a pebble dropped in still water. Do you notice how the ripples reach the edges before the center acknowledges they exist? You do, and you teach yourself patience that does not pass for passivity. Somewhere down the corridor, a laugh rings out, too bright, slightly brittle, and then fades. The brazier settles with a faint hiss. You fold a spare cloak over your arm and step into the hall where lamplight breaks into squares on the floor. Each one a quiet territory to be crossed without leaving footprints. The night inside the villa is not empty. It is a chessboard set for tomorrow, and the pieces move even when the players sleep. The villa grows quieter, but quiet here never means empty. Beyond the guest chambers, the walls hold voices you are not meant to hear, yet hearing them is part of your survival. The marble corridor narrows toward the private wing, where torchlight flickers unevenly, casting long shadows across the painted walls. A faint murmur reaches you almost lost in the sigh of night air through an open window. You slow your pace, adjusting a fold of your tunic, as if preoccupied, allowing the sound to guide you. Two voices close, but not equal the steady measured tone of a senator you have seen at the master's table, and the softer, quicker responses of a man trying to keep up. They stand just beyond the curve of the hall near a side door to the master's study. The senator speaks of debts owed, of favors traded like coins of a vote in the Senate that will not go unpurchased. His companion murmurs assent, promising to lean on the right men at the right time. You do not linger openly. Instead, you pause near a carved niche, holding a bronze bust of the master's grandfather, tilting the oil lamp in your hand as if to inspect its wick. In the lamplight, the bust's eyes glint, its expression stern and fixed. The voices continue low but urgent until the senator's laugh cuts them short. Footsteps retreat toward the atrium, leaving the air heavier than before. Further down the hall, a half-open door breathes out the scent of ink and fresh wax. Inside, the master's secretary sits at a table, leaning close to a client whose toga hem is frayed, but whose ring finger bears a costly emerald. The secretary's stylus moves quickly, scratching promises into a tablet, while the client slides a small purse across the table. Neither looks toward the doorway. You step past with the same unhurried pace you began, with the moment tucked away for later recall. At times, you wonder how much of the villa's real work happens in daylight. By night, the rule's loosened doors stand ajar. Conversations wrap themselves in shadows, and the servants who pass unnoticed carry as much knowledge as the men who trade gold. It is here in these corridors that you learn the difference between gossip and leverage. Gossip flutters and fades. Leverage waits in silence until you need it. You remember a lesson from the tutor. Truth is most dangerous when it is partial. A scrap of overheard talk can be worth more than the whole story if placed in the right ears at the right time. But you have also learned that power is not in the telling. It is in knowing when not to tell. To repeat what you hear tonight would be to spend a coin better saved. A shadow crosses the far end of the corridor, a fellow attendant carrying a folded cloak. His eyes meet yours briefly, and you know without speaking that he has heard something too. You pass each other and silence the exchange, as formal as a bow, each of you holding your own piece of the night's ledger. In the courtyard, beyond a pair of guards, stand near the gate, speaking in low Latin about a caravan delayed on the road from Ostia. You note it, not because the goods matter to you, but because delay means a shift in the master's schedule. Guests expected. Tomorrow may not arrive until the next day, altering the rhythm of the household. Such changes ripple outward in ways that touch even the smallest duties. The villa's private wing empties slowly, one conversation at a time, slipping behind closed doors. You make your way back toward the attendants' quarters, the sounds of the night now replaced by the softer noises of a house settling into rest, the creak of wood cooling after the day's heat, the faint drip of water from the courtyard fountain, the rustle of a curtain in the breeze. Yet even in this hush, you know the day is not truly over. Somewhere in these walls, words are still being traded, alliances tested, and promises bound in whispers. The quiet is broken by a sound you know too well, a soft deliberate knock, the kind that avoids waking anyone not meant to hear it. You open your eyes to the faint lamplight of the attendant's room, shadows trembling across the ceiling. The knock comes again, 3 beats and a pause. This is not a summons for wine or an errand to the kitchen. This is the call that can tilt your standing for days, weeks, sometimes longer. You rise without speaking, sliding from your bed and straightening your tunic in the dim light. The others in the room shift under their blankets, feigning sleep. No one asks where you're going. Everyone knows the rule. Those who leave at this hour return with a story they will not tell. You push the curtain aside and step into the hall where the air feels cooler, thinner. The messenger is a young slave from the upper floor. His eyes lowered, his hand still resting against the wall, as though to anchor himself. The master requests you. He says simply, then turns back the way he came. You follow the stone floor, cold under your feet. The corridors narrowing as you near the private chambers. In the antechamber, the lamplight is softer, filtered through bronze lattice work that throws patterns on the walls. The steward waits, his expression unreadable. He nods, once a small motion that feels like the turning of a key. You pass into the inner room where the master stands by a table scattered with wax tablets and scrolls. He gestures you closer, pointing to a sealed letter resting beside a signet ring. This must reach the magistrate before first light, he says. His tone carries no warmth, but no edge, either just the weight of a task that admits no delay. You bow, taking the letter with both hands, the wax seal warm from the lamplight. The walk to the gate is silent except for the echo of your steps. Outside, the air is sharp with the scent of wet stone. A guard hands you a cloak without a word, fastening it at your shoulder. The city beyond the villa wall is still, the streets slick with dew. You move quickly, the letter pressed against your side, each turn of the road chosen from memory. Delivering such a message is not unusual, but the hour, the seal, the urgency, these make it something else. You wonder what words are pressed into the wax, what promises or threats it carries, but you do not break the seal. That is not your place. The magistrate receives it with a nod and no question, sliding it beneath his arm, as though it were nothing more than a loaf of bread. On your return, the eastern sky is paling. The villa's gate opens to the same stillness you left, but the steward is waiting just inside. He takes the cloak, studies your face for a moment, then says, "The master will know you returned without delay." It is not praise, but it is something that can be shaped into it later. Back in the attendant's room, the others are stirring. No one asks where you've been. The knock in the night is not a story to be shared. You settle onto your bed, the memory of the cool streets still clinging to your skin. Outside, the first bird calls from the garden, and the day begins again, layered over what passed in the hours before dawn. The first bird call is still hanging in the air when you realize you are not going back to sleep. Your eyes trace the dim rafters overhead, the faint light from the courtyard stretching across the floor like a thin sheet. You've walked these days enough times to know their weight, and tonight's hours have been heavier than most. You lie still, listening to the slow stir of the villa waking. Somewhere in the kitchens, a pan scrapes across stone. In the garden, water splashes into the fountain with the same rhythm it kept yesterday and the day before, and will keep tomorrow. Yet the pattern never feels quite the same to you. Each day carries the residue of the last of fine dust you can't wash off. Can you feel it? The way every gesture, Every word you've placed in this house over months, years threads together into a tapestry that can be pulled apart with one careless motion. You have no chains, no locked doors, but you live in a cage all the same, a gilded one built from duties, glances, and the unspoken rule that you exist for the service of another's will. Your mind runs over the faces of the night, the master at his table, the magistrate in the moonlit garden, the senator's shadow near the study door. You think of the rivals in silk, the tutor's measured voice, the steward's silent nod. Each one is part of the lattice that holds you in place and part of the net that catches you when you fall. Rising quietly, you move to the small window that looks toward the city. The roofs are silvered by dawn. The streets below still empty, except for a lone cart rumbling toward the forum. Somewhere beyond those streets lies a life you no longer claim, a past that has been polished out of you by the villa's long, deliberate work. You wonder not for the first time whether you could step back into it if given the chance. The attendance room begins to stir in earnest, now voices low, the soft thud of sandals on stone. You turn away from the window, wrapping the morning's calm around yourself like a cloak. Soon, there will be tasks, the master's morning reading the steward's instructions, the careful arrangement of another day's performance. Before you leave, your gaze catches on the small shrine in the corner. You straighten its garland again, not because it needs it, but because the axe steadies your hands. In this house, control is rare and often invisible. Sometimes it's as small as the way you place a leaf, the way you fold a cloth, the way you make sure the silence belongs to you. The sun's first line crosses the courtyard, touching the marble floor in gold. You step into it, your shadow stretching ahead toward the hall. Another day begins, and you walk into it, knowing that the threads you weave now will tighten or loosen the bars of your cage. That is the life you live here, watched, weighed, and always performing. The world you've just walked through, the candlelit chambers, the whispered bargains, the delicate games of favor, shows one side of ancient Rome's appetite for control. But power here was never satisfied with subtlety alone. Step outside the perfumed air of the villa, and you'll find a city just as willing to make its authority loud, public, and unforgettable. Rome's streets and forums were stages for spectacles, and not all of them were plays. Some were punishments so strange, so creative in their cruelty, that they seemed designed less to correct a crime, and more to burn an image into the minds of every onlooker. If life as a concubine was a careful dance, then life under Rome's justice could be a sudden, jarring drop into the absurd. The first thing you hear is laughter, not the warm dinner table kind, but the thin, sharp sort that clings to stone walls and follows you around corners. You turn, and there it is, a man dressed as a donkey, wobbling on a crude wooden platform, while two boys in the crowd tug at the tail stitched to his tunic. His ears are floppy scraps of "Felt his crime" scrawled across a placard hanging from his neck. This isn't theater, though the audience treats it like one. In Rome, humiliation could be as official as a tax, and this is what passes for justice when the goal is to make the punishment walk. The donkey ears. They mark him as a liar, someone who swore falsely in court. The Romans adored their visual metaphors. If you sinned with words, they'd dress you as an animal, too stubborn or too foolish to speak sense. You shuffle with the crowd as the guards push him forward, careful to keep him in the center where everyone can see. These processions were less about the destination and more about the performance along the way. Streets in Rome acted as open-air amphitheaters for shame the bystanders, both spectators and participants. The crime became a traveling story. Someone would spot the punished man, whisper the offense, and point. The story rippled outward, picking up new smirks and raised eyebrows as it went. Sometimes the costumes were simple, a ragged tunic, bare feet, maybe a rope belt. Other times, they were tailored to the insult. A thief might be wrapped in chains with fake coins glued to his sleeves, the metal clinking with every reluctant step. A baker caught cheating the weight of bread could be made to wear an oversized loaf around his neck, the dough stiff and cracking as the sun baked it harder. These weren't random acts of cruelty, they were civic messages. Steal bread, become the bread. You can almost imagine the city's magistrates discussing these punishments as though they were staging a festival float. There was a strange civic pride in making the punishment fit the crime so neatly that no explanation was needed. In a society that thrived on public image, losing face was worse than losing coin. And here's the sharpest sting: these parades often wound past your neighbors, your clients, your rivals. People you'd seen at the baths at the market now saw you from an entirely new angle as a walking cautionary tale. If you've ever had someone post an unflattering picture of you online, one you can't quite take down, you've brushed against the Roman sense of public embarrassment. Except here, you don't get to hide behind a screen or scroll past quickly. You are the scroll. You keep moving because standing still makes it worse. The laughter grows and thins as the streets change, but the memory of it will follow you longer than any fine. Not all victims of these parades were guilty in the way we think of it. Some were political scapegoats caught in the gears of a senator's grudge. The genius of the spectacle was that once you were in it, innocence didn't matter. The crowd read the costume, not the court transcripts. Reputation was as fragile as a clay oil lamp one slip, and the pieces scattered where anyone could trample them. And sometimes the Romans added music. Flutes, drums, even horns, if the mood demanded it, turning a sentence into something almost carnivalesque. The sound was both a lure and a lure's trap. You'd come closer to see the fun, only to realize it was someone's dignity on display. That blend of merriment and malice was Rome at its most performative, and it worked because everyone agreed out loud or in silence that it was better to laugh than to be laughed at. You can picture the donkey-eared man finally reaching the Forum, the city's main stage. Guards push him to the steps, the crowd clustering like bees around honey. The magistrate might step forward to recite the crime, or maybe the placard says enough. There's no applause when it's over, just a slow dispersal, like smoke thinning in the wind. But the story has already lodged itself in dozens of minds, ready to be repeated over wine tonight, and again, tomorrow, and again, the next time someone lies under oath. The streets are quieter now, but the air feels heavier, as though the stones themselves know what's about to happen. You follow a short column of guards toward the Tiber, their sandals clicking in unison. Between them walks a man whose eyes stay fixed on the ground. He's barefoot, his tunic plain, and around his ankles the rope leaves raw pink marks. At first glance, you might think this is just another petty criminal on his way to some stockade. But then you notice the coarse leather sack being carried behind him, its mouth wide enough to swallow a man whole. Inside, the burlap bulges, strangely twitching as if it has a pulse of its own. This is Powina Kule the sack, with no escape. It's Rome's chosen fate for a parricide, someone convicted of killing their own parent. Even among Rome's most seasoned jurists, this crime was considered an unnatural tear in the fabric of society. The punishment matched the horror, no ordinary execution, but a ritual meant to erase the offender entirely, body and memory both. The ritual has its steps. First, the condemned is whipped as though the flesh must be softened before it's sewn away. Then comes the sack, but never empty. Tradition demands company for the journey into the dark: a dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a viper. Each animal carried its own symbolic insult: the dog for shamelessness, the rooster for restless greed, the monkey for distorted humanity, the viper for the venom in a child's heart turned against a parent. The condemned is tied and shoved inside the writhing creatures, pressed into him until the sack bulges like a grotesque market bundle. You've heard whispers that sometimes the animals fought each other before touching the man, turning the inside of the sack into a chaos of claws, beaks, and teeth. But you also know that the real terror was the awareness that the air would not last. The sack was stitched shut, carried to the nearest water, and dropped in. Death came not with ceremony, but with the quiet gurgle of the river claiming its due. If it sounds like a cruel invention, it is, but it's also one of Rome's most deliberate symbolic gestures. Killing a parent meant you'd cut yourself off from your family's past and Rome's future. The sack was both coffin and exile. The water ensured no grave could be honored, no ashes collected. To a Roman mind, that was almost worse than the death itself. Imagine for a moment the crowd's role in this. People would gather along the riverbanks, some grim-faced others, whispering bets on how quickly the sack would sink. A few might claim to see omens in the way the water closed over it. Was it smooth and swift? A sign perhaps that the gods were satisfied? Did it rock and thrash before vanishing? Maybe the gods wanted to make a point. There's a strange echo here with certain modern punishments, the kind where the act is less about stopping the crime and more about staging the message. The Romans didn't care if the sight of a man sewn into a sack scared others straight. They cared that it reaffirmed a social boundary. Parents were pillars in Roman law and religion. Strike at them, and you shook the city itself. Of course, not every case was clean. Rome was a city of politics, and politics loves its scapegoats. Sometimes the evidence was thin, or the witnesses unreliable. But once a man stood before the magistrates, accused of parricide, the machinery began to move. Trials could be quick, and appeals rare. And once the sentence was passed, there was no halfway measure. Poeniculae was not the sort of penalty one could commute to exile or fine. You notice the condemned man doesn't fight when the guards push him toward the waiting sack. Maybe he's already made peace with the verdict, or maybe he knows resistance only drags out the spectacle. The animals are already inside, restless. The viper's head pokes briefly through a gap tongue, flickering in the sunlight, before disappearing back into the darkness. A scribe stands nearby, recording the names and the charge for the city archives. That's another Roman flourish, ensuring the official record outlives the person. The man's name will be there forever, attached to the crime, long after the sack has rotted in the riverbed. When the sack finally slides into the water, there's a brief muffled thrash, then nothing. The Tiber closes over it without ceremony. The crowd lingers for a moment, perhaps hoping for some final sign, but the current takes it downstream. One less person in Rome, one more story to tell over wine. The smell reaches you first, sharp metallic, and riding the warm gust from a brazier that's been burning since dawn. You edge closer, following the murmurs of the gathered crowd. In the center of the square sits the object of their fascination, a solid bronze chair, its surface glinting in the sunlight, the armrests shaped into snarling lion heads. It would almost look regal if not for the black soot blooming beneath its legs. This is the Sella Ferrea, the iron chair, and someone is about to sit in it for the last time. A man stands nearby, hands bound, glancing at the chair, the way a sailor might eye a storm cloud. His crime, arson. In Rome, fire was no laughing matter. Whole districts had burned before, and the city's leaders took the threat personally. The iron chair wasn't just a way to kill. It was a warning that anyone playing with flames would meet their own inescapable heat. The irony, if you'll pardon the word, was not lost on the crowd. The process is unhurried. Executioners check the coals, fanning them until the heat blooms upward in shimmering waves. The chair's legs glow faintly at the base, the warmth creeping up until the seat itself begins to radiate like a stone left too long in the sun.
You're safe with me.
You can almost feel it from where you stand. Somewhere behind you, a boy whispers to his father, and the man shushes him, eyes fixed on the scene. When the condemned is finally brought forward, there's no grand speech. Rome's justice didn't always need one. The spectacle was the statement. He's pushed down onto the chair, the metal singing faintly under his weight. The sound isn't loud, but it carries a hiss that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. Guards hold his arms more to keep him from toppling than to prevent escape. Once you're seated, there's nowhere to go. You think of how the Romans saw heat, not just as destruction, but as purification. In temples, fire burned away impurities and offerings. Here it burned away the offender himself, leaving nothing but the story. The punishment played into a cultural obsession with balance destroy, by fire be destroyed by fire. It's the same grim symmetry that turned theft into a parade of stolen goods, or perjury into donkey ears. The crowd's expressions vary. Some watch with morbid curiosity, others with tight-lipped approval. A few look away entirely, their eyes drifting to the rooftops, as though searching for anything else. Rome's punishments thrived on visibility, but that didn't mean every stomach could handle the sight. Still, absence from the square would have its own consequences. People remembered who showed up for justice and who didn't. From the far edge of